At the 1 yard line in this game that's been played over a year. Really, we worked on this for about 14 months to get us to this point. We're going to run it right up the middle and score for the American people. And I tell you what, everybody is going to benefit from this bill. Sean, as you noted, all those features. It's the most conservative piece of legislation we've ever worked on. You need to mention at the same time that even though while we're having historic tax cuts, we also have historic savings. We're going to save $1.6 trillion for the American people. We're going to cut down the size and scope of government, make it more efficient, make it work better for the people. They demand and deserve that, and the Republicans are delivering.
Hello and welcome to The Absolute Truth with Emerald Robinson. I'm your guest host, Brandon Weichert, and we're asking ourselves on this very important day for the Trump administration, just how big and beautiful is the big, beautiful bill really? In the last 48 hours, the Senate has passed through their version of the bill that will now go back to the House of Representatives. They will vote on it, and it will eventually meander its way through our elephantine legislature, out of the Congress and into the president's Oval Office, where he will either sign or veto the bill. I suspect at this point, whatever the final version of the big, beautiful bill ends up being, Donald Trump will sign it. Of course, this has opened a very significant rupture within a certain segment of the Republican Party. We talked earlier this week about the war over the Iran war. There's now a war over the great war for saving our country's economy and our finances. A group of Republican congressmen and senators, notably Congressman Thomas Massie, as well as Senator Thom Tillis and Senator Rand Paul, have been leading the fight from the right against this bill. They argue that it's going to add an insurmountable level of debt to our already $32 or $33 trillion debt load. We're basically going to be yet again borrowing money at this point from our great-great-great-grandkids to pay for whatever is in the bill. And what is in the bill, and that is also a point of contention, the Democrats love to say, oh, Medicare and Medicaid and all of these social policies, these social benefits that we've been paying for 80 years on. They say that Trump is going to secretly cut it, that he's giving his wealthy friends a tax break. Meanwhile, all the poor people of America that rely on Medicaid and Medicare, they're suddenly going to find themselves out on the street. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth. The president and the Republicans have been clear about one thing in particular. They are only going after the people who are abusing Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. I was reading on Breitbart earlier today, there was a big bust, a federal bust of a $14 billion with a B Medicare fraud network. We're talking about massive numbers here for decades of people coming into the country and abusing the system. Here's another thing as well. When they talk about kicking people off the rolls, the Democrats don't say who might be kicked off. They just say, oh, the poor people. Well, in fact, what they're talking about are illegal immigrants. Yes, the president has been very clear, as has his party, that we are not going to allow for illegal immigrants to come into the country and to abuse our social benefit systems that were only ever intended for actual citizens who pay into the system. And I want to make that clear. People who pay into the system, our citizens, are not, under the bill, going to lose their benefits. That is a lie being propagated by the Democratic Party, which wants you to hate this bill. Now, the opposition on the right, from Rand Paul and Thomas Massie in particular, I think those are principled stands, and I think that they are right to highlight the fact that, unfortunately, the president seems to be, as Ed Dowd said to us on Monday, the president does seem to be backtracking on his promise previously to go after the deficit spending, to cut down on our excessive debt. And he's instead turning into the idea that we're going to be able to outgrow our massive debt by doing this bill, by doing his tariffs. And we already saw, again, last week, the president announced a massive windfall coming in already from those initial round of tariffs that we had imposed. The tariffs, of course, that everybody, all the experts said were never going to work. Well, now even the experts are saying, maybe Donald Trump outsmarted all the experts. This is what prompted President Trump to say, go back to business school. I think he's probably right. There's a Wharton grad right there for you. It's one of the best business schools in the world. Donald Trump went there. I think he understands this. He made a lot of money in the private sector. Anyway, the big, beautiful bill does have some things that the Republicans should be worried about, notably in that deficit spending. But just maybe we can ameliorate some of these problems with the growth plan. Scott Bessent, who was himself a financial wizard on Wall Street, made all of his money there, who's now the Secretary of Treasury, he's probably one of the best Secretary of Treasuries we've had since Secretary of Treasury Mellon under Calvin Coolidge back in the 1920s. Scott Bessent insists that we will be able to, at the very least, on some level, outgrow some of the debt that we are incurring. And we hope and pray that that is correct, because it is very obvious that President Donald Trump, whenever this bill is finalized, and it's going to come soon, I think, he will sign this into effect. Now, here's the problem, though. Our debt and deficits are so chronically bad that if we don't start addressing them, if we keep piling on, it might not end up being, we might not be able, rather, to just pay it down or to outgrow it. And so I think that this is a big gamble President Donald Trump is taking. Obviously, President Donald Trump was handed a, let's just say, a steaming bag of excrement predicated on what the Biden regime left him, which was not a great economy. The president came in and the economy was doing badly. You all know in this audience, just going to buy eggs was an ordeal. You had to float a bank loan. Under President Trump, there have been real successes in lowering the cost of goods. And those of us in the national security field who were very worried about the war in the Middle East against Iran possibly leading to spikes in oil prices, luckily, our fears were completely not necessary. The oil prices have gone down, and Americans going into this very busy July 4th weekend seem to be enjoying a nice bounce in lower prices for their pocketbooks. So we are seeing real economic gains. The big beautiful bill is not perfect, but it is big. And it might just be what we need to actually overcome the problems in the near term, which is that we need to generate some economic activity. That, coupled with the tariffs, might be just what we need to do that. Also, I would like to also bring up clip number 6 and just reiterate the fact that it is now proven that what the Democrats are saying, according to Breitbart News, this was published earlier today. According to Breitbart News, it is 100% a lie what the Democrats are saying. They are fear-mongering you into believing that your Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security benefits are going to be taken away. That is not the case. And just remember, those tax cuts that the Democrats keep ranting about, how it's going to benefit only the wealthy. That's simply not true. Many people benefited from the first round of Trump tax cuts in the first term. How it works is when you cut taxes, and this was proven in the 8 years of the Reagan presidency, when you cut taxes like President Trump is saying to do, when you cut through the regulatory body like he has been doing with his executive orders since taking power, what you actually end up doing is you end up making the economy not only more efficient and able to grow more easily, a rising tide lifting all boats, but my friends, you also actually see the government take in more in revenue, because the wealthy people who are paying a lot of the taxes, they're not having to hide their money. Normally, there's all these cogitations that people with money have to go through to keep their money out of the hands of Uncle Sam. with increased taxes. By lowering these tax rates, Trump is actually stimulating the economy. He's actually really living up to the Reagan vision of trickle down, and it works. It works. We know that in the 1980s. So all of this is to say that the big beautiful bill has yet to be passed, signed into law rather. It will probably make it through to the president soon. He will likely sign what's in there. The fear mongering from the left, from the party that piled on more debt to this country. Barack Obama in his 8 years piled on more debt than the 43 presidents who came before him. The Biden regime, he piled on an insane amount of debt, for something like $3 or $4 trillion in a year and a half when he took over. And he kept going right up until the end. And we know all the waste and the graft with USAID, which thankfully was shut down in the last 24 hours. Our friend Mike Benz was covering it. The point here is that the Democrats don't really care about the debt. The Democrats don't really care about Medicare, Medicaid being cut. What they care about is their power being removed. And that's one of the good things about this bill. I don't like the deficit spending. I don't like the debt explosion. But at the end of the day, this bill is going to reduce the abuse and fraud in Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, which will actually increase the lifespan of those policies and make it available to more people in future generations. That's a win. President Trump also in this bill, Tom Homan has been raving about how great it is because it's going to allow for the immigration enforcement agencies in this country to cut through all the red tape and actually start deporting people en masse. This is what President Trump promised to do. This is promises made and promises kept. Congressman Massey and Senator Rand Paul are two very noble men. I do not like when the president attacks them the way he does, but and they're probably right about the deficit spending and the debt explosion. But at this point, every president has been spending this way. We can't stop the spending. Washington, D.C. will never stop the spending no matter who's in charge. So why don't we at least try to create a bill? And this is what Trump has done. Try to create a bill that will allow for us to actually grow out of some of this debt and also provide opportunities for American civilians, American citizens, and also possibly, finally, end illegal immigration and end the waste, fraud, and abuse that's in Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, to basically codify into law all those great initial cuts that DOJ had made at the start of the administration. The jury's still out as to whether this will work or not, but President Trump is a gambler in a good way. He's taking risks to try to forward the country, and I am with him on this, and I pray that this bill gets passed. With The Absolute Truth on Lindell TV, I'm Brandon Weichert. Stay tuned. We've got some great guests coming up.
Swollen limbs, joint pain, inflammation, skin aging, and cognitive decline. These are just a few of the awful side effects that you can experience due to poor blood circulation. And popping ibuprofen is not a solution to the pain. It's only temporary relief, and it's only masking the true problem, which is inflammation. Researchers are saying to add this Antarctic super nutrient to your diet. I'm talking about omega-3 fatty acids, but not just any form of omegas. These particular omega-3 fatty acids are sourced from wild-caught krill. Has been shown to support healthy blood pressure, circulation, brain health, as well as reduce inflammation, swelling, and joint pain. For a limited time, you can grab Native Path Antarctic Krill Oil for up to 66% off plus free shipping. Just go to getkrill.com/Lindell right now to get your special offer.
Welcome back to The Absolute Truth with Emerald Robinson. I'm Brandon Weichert filling in for this July 4th holiday week. Who is Mamdani the Marxist? Why does he act this way? Where is he even from? Do we even know anything about the man running to become the mayor of America's most iconic, largest city? Well, here's what we know. We know he's actually originally from Uganda. And we know that he emigrated to the United States in 2018 as a grown man. And the first thing he started doing was to integrate himself into the far left wing ideological protest movement, the Democratic Socialists for America. He became a virulent opponent of American capitalism, of American exceptionalism. Isn't he a foreigner? Well, apparently, that is qualifications now for running for mayor. Can you roll clip number 2, please?
What the purpose is about this entire project, it's not simply to raise class consciousness, but to win socialism. And obviously raising class consciousness is a critical part of that. But making sure that we have candidates that both understand that and are willing to put that forward at every which moment that they have, at every which opportunity that they're given. We have to continue to elect more socialists, and we have to ensure that we are unapologetic about our socialism. There are also other issues that we firmly believe in, whether it's BDS, right, or whether it's the end goal of seizing the means of production.
The means of production. He's literally a Marxist, and he isn't apologetic about it. That's how far we, but specifically New York City, has gone, because they love this guy in New York. They want him to be their leader. There's talk that he's eventually going to run for higher office beyond New York. Good heavens help us. Can you roll also clip number 3? Here's Mamdani talking to CNN.
So when people say democratic socialist, right, and I'm curious what you think this means. I mean, do you like capitalism?
No, I have many critiques of capitalism. And I think ultimately the definition for me of why I call myself a democratic socialist is the words of Dr. King decades ago. He said, call it democracy or call it democratic socialism. There must be a better distribution of wealth for all of God's children in this country. And that's what I'm focused on, is dignity and taking on income inequality. And for too long, politicians have pretended that we're spectators to that crisis of affordability. We're actually actors, and we have the choice to exacerbate it, like Mayor Adams has done, or to respond to it and resolve it, like I'm planning to do.
Oh, this guy is a commie. He's literally a communist. He's from Uganda. He came to the country in 2018. He never held a real job. The first job he got was as a liberal left-wing community agitator. He spent the entire last 8 years trashing our system, trying to tear down our country and our economic way of life. This guy is not good for America, but there's more to it. And I'm going to bring in now our friend, the great Trevor Loudon, who's an expert on the communist threat doctrine and their threat to the United States, because, my friends, the communists never went away. They unfortunately just came to America. Trevor, it is so great to see you. Thank you for joining us today. Let's just get into it. You know, he comes from Uganda, and my question is, imagine if a immigrant came to Kampala, the capital city of Uganda, joined the most radical revolutionary groups there, and then 8 years after becoming a Ugandan citizen, decided to run for mayor of Kampala. What do you think would happen to that guy in Uganda?
Well, I don't think he'd get a very favorable press coverage. And the only reason he is even viable right now is because the press is so fawning. We just saw that interview. You know, democratic socialism is all about Martin Luther King. Well, no, democratic socialism is communism. You know, democratic socialist America is explicitly communist. They're aligned to communist Cuba. They have meetings with communist Cuban officials. They work with the Communist Party USA, European communist parties. They are communist. But you would never know that by listening to the mainstream media. That's why this guy's got a shot.
And what we're looking at right now, just so everybody understands, this is video from, I think, in the last couple months. Mamdani got into a screaming match, threatened to, I would have loved to see the fight, threatened to fight Tom Homan, the border czar in New York, at a rally. Clearly, Mamdani is not your typical left-winger in the sense that we know of, where they talk a lot and then they kind of let their people go into the fray. He's taking the fists, he's going right into the battle here. Does he represent a sort of new wave of left-wing agitprop, or is this just the typical thing? He's just got a different way of doing it.
No, look, this guy is a violent revolutionary. Yeah. You know, we've seen the protests at Columbia University, which his father was a big part of organizing, actually. The big mass protests of Islamists, communists, trashing the university, trashing Israel, supporting Hamas, the terrorist group. Now, he is a violent revolutionary. You can see it in his face. You give this guy power, we're in for a world of grief. I wouldn't want to be a policeman in New York. I wouldn't want to be an ICE agent. I wouldn't want to be a taxpayer. He's gonna just trash the city, completely trash the city.
And he's basically said this, he was asked, and I didn't include it in today's clips, but I remember I saw about a week ago, he was asked basically, what do you do with somebody who's, for instance, an illegal? Well, he's going to treat them like a citizen. What do you do with enforcement of, say, anti-theft laws? He's going to not have the police enforce basic common sense laws. So your point about the police, I mean, New York's already been sliding for many years since Giuliani left, in my opinion, but it definitely looks a lot to me like this is purposeful. He is purposely choosing, if he gets elected, to make the city as unlivable for ordinary people as possible. Is this part of the Marxist scheme to make America unlivable?
Yeah, look, absolutely. He's a revolutionary. He wants to bring down the bastion of the American free enterprise system, the most important economic city in the country. Now, remember, you talked about how Giuliani had to fix the last mess. Well, that mess was left by David Dinkins, who was the mayor of New York in the early 90s. Now, he didn't enforce laws. Times Square was full of prostitutes and drugs and criminals. The tourists stayed away. The businesses were collapsing. People were leaving the city. Well, David Dinkins was also a Marxist, a member of Democratic Socialists of America. He was a revolutionary, but he was a moderate compared to this guy. This guy is DSA has gone way, way, way to the left since the Dinkins era. DSA is now a full-on communist party, and that's what this guy is.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Trevor, but I believe AOC was also, she came out of the DSA, or she had affiliation when she was initially running.
She's a card-carrying member. She's been to meet with Latin American communists. They've got at least 6 DSAs on the city council in New York now. And Brad Lander, who ran against him and is now talked about being his first vice mayor, is also a DSA comrade. So the fix is in, folks. The DSA is taken over New York, and they want to trash the place.
In the violent revolutionary bit, and I can't help but notice, he sort of disappeared from the front pages, but Luigi Mangione, the infamous shooter of the United Healthcare CEO, who claimed that he did this because of the exploding costs of healthcare in America, which, on one level he's not wrong. The costs are exploding exponentially. That's largely because of the Democrats, though, but that's another story. Yeah, but Luigi Mangione, he's been heralded as a violent Marxist revolutionary. Is there any connectivity between him and the rise of Mamdani? Because New York seems to love Mangione as well.
Well, yeah, I think this is the culture. We cannot underestimate the power of the communists controlling New York education for the last 50 years. Yeah. They took over the New York education system in the 50s, so it's really, my maths isn't that good. It's more like 70 years. So young New Yorkers are getting brainwashed with this stuff all the time. And some of them are going to turn to extreme measures like young Mangione. And a lot of people are going to lionize him and think this is some kind of hero, like some kind of resistance fighter. So these are the people that form Zohrab Mamdani's base. He's got 20,000 volunteers in New York, mostly DSA comrades. He's got 50,000 people from all over the country. See, this is how DSA wins elections. This is how they got AOC in power and Rashida Tlaib and others. They federalize it. They have phone bankers from Seattle and Phoenix and Minneapolis all phoning in. They have volunteers coming in from all over the country to pound the pavements in New York. This is a federal election to DSA. And they have big plans for this guy if he can get the mayoralty.
So Is it safe to say that going forward, the DSA is basically slowly going to just co-opt the leadership of the Democratic Party? The more that the boomer class retires, it's going to be more like Mamdani and AOC replacing them. Is that fair to say?
Oh, look, absolutely. I think they'll try and run AOC for president. You know, they're already going after the old guard like Chuck Schumer. They've already, like, I've written books about this. I say there's about 100 members of the Democratic caucus now who are Marxists. That's going to increase in the next 10 years too. That's nearly half of them. That'll increase to 3/4 in the next 2 or 3 election cycles. That's the plan, to take over the Democratic Party and make it a communist party.
And, you know, Trevor, just remembering my history of American politics, we saw sort of a similar trend occur in the Vietnam era, in the Watergate era, right, where the old guard Democrats, who were probably more moderate, you know, more progressive, certainly, but not radical communists, they were phased out and replaced with, you know, the current group that's running the Democratic Party. But it was
the McGovern generation.
That's right. That's right.
The far leftist Students for Democratic Society, all those 60s radicals flipped the Democratic Party and made it what it is today. Well, now we're going to the next phase.
So, Trevor,
that's what's coming up next.
Perfect. So we got about a minute left. But, Trevor, I'm looking at now my own party, the Republican Party. I lived through the Tea Party Revolution. I lived through MAGA. I see a lot of similarities between the bottoms-up Tea Party and this bottoms-up DSA co-option of the Democratic Party. My fear with what's going on now with Trump, and feel free to tell me if I'm wrong or right, after Trump is no longer in office, it doesn't seem like MAGA has the kind of galvanization that it needs to continue with these, winning elections at the national level. Am I wrong in this? Is there still hope? Or yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think there's hope, but there is certainly a danger there. Like I follow the Republican Party a lot, and it's getting a lot more grassroots, a lot more working class, a lot more small business oriented. The old country club Republican, the real estate investors club is fading away, and you are getting a much sounder and stronger Republican Party. But it's will it hold together when Trump's gone? That's another question. I think it will, but it is an open question. Yeah, I take your point.
Well, Trevor, I want you to be right. God knows it, because I have dealt with the I have dealt with the DSA when I was many years ago in college. I was the Republican president on our campus at DePaul in Chicago, so I know exactly. Yeah, I know exactly what kind of people. Yeah. So thank you so much for coming, Trevor. I've been a huge fan of yours for many years. It's a pleasure to meet you. And we are going to go over, and after the break, we'll be talking to Dan Collins about the state of the global economy. You don't want to miss this. This is The Absolute Truth with Emerald Robinson.
Huge breaking news. Mike Lindell Media Corporation, which includes Lindell TV, has gone public with the stock trading symbol MLMC.
Kara Castronovo from Lindell TV.
This is Allison Steinberg here with Lindell TV. We are currently on LindellTV.com.
The platform, which has rapidly grown to attract 7.2 million monthly viewers and 150 million annual impressions. Vocalist's subsidiary social media network supports over 70,000 accounts, and MLMC is poised for even greater success.
This is going to be big, everybody, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Hello and welcome back to The Absolute Truth with Emerald Robinson. I'm your guest host, Brandon Weichert. It's so good to have you back. Well, continuing with our conversation from the first part of the show, the U.S. economy, according to most experts, is, quote, on wobbly footing. Wall Street strategists are, as this headline says, getting cautious about the stock market's recent record. we are entering a period of what some experts are saying, are warning, might be the quote Biden hangover. Remember, since Trump took office, we've had a really healthy run of jobs reports and Wall Street reports. The economy was, to much of everyone's surprise, looking very good. But now, between wars in the Middle East, which, as I said in the beginning, we actually managed to avoid some of the worst economic fallout from that. But still, that's always a concern, spikes in oil prices, because then that would lead to inflation, which means interest rates will never come down. But also concerns about, for instance, the possibility of a recession. Our friend Ed Dowd was on with us Monday, and he warned that his financial group, Finance Technology, they have a report out predicting within the next year a recession, and that recession could be deep. Not to worry, he said, though, because that will potentially reset the economy enough to allow for the middle class to start making gains again, which, let's face it, the middle class has really not been making gains since 2008's financial crisis. So I'm now joined by my dear friend, Dan Collins. Dan is the host of a very popular podcast. I've appeared on it a couple of times. Dan, let's get Dan in, please. Hey, Dan. Your podcast is Chaos. What's it called again? I'm sorry.
Chaos Incorporated.
Chaos Incorporated. I love that name. So, Dan, tell me, Ed Dowd is talking about possible recession within the year. You've got this big, beautiful bill, maybe not so beautiful, but it is big, and it is a bill. What do you think? You have years of experience in finance. You have years of experience running factories in China. You have an engineering background. So you're a guy that would know, and you have a world kind of experience. What do you think's happening with the big, beautiful bill? What's going on with our economy?
I see trouble ahead. Most of these U.S. economic statistics are fake. You just mentioned the Biden jobs numbers. They reported 14 or 15 million jobs over those 4 years. But if you really dig into it, most of those jobs were net pandemic hangovers, so jobs that disappeared and then came back after COVID. Net, he printed $8 trillion in debt. We got about 3 million jobs, and more than half of those were government. And if you look at that, within those numbers, you've got, non-native born Americans took all the jobs, and native born Americans took net loss of jobs last 4 years. So I'm a real economy guy. I look at the real economic statistics. I don't like to look at a lot of these percentage numbers. I look at cars, right? 25 years ago, we made 12.5 million cars. Last year, we made 10 million cars. Electrical power generation is basically stagnated for 25 years. We're completely dependent on China for everything from syringes to plywood. Believe it or not, plywood comes from China. It's Russian forests processed in China, and they somehow export here cheaper than we can make plywood. So we have been completely deindustrialized. We are now, and I don't envy the Trump administration, because he's coming into a situation where we have to reindustrialize the entire country, upend the global trade system, which had to happen because the entire world's been taking advantage of us for decades through policies called mercantilism. And within that structure, you've got basically a national bankruptcy. So we are a distressed asset. We're $37 trillion in debt. We have to roll over $8 trillion this year. That is keeping the bond markets, which have diverged from the Fed. It's even questionable now if the Fed reduces rates, which the Trump administration wants them to do. It's questionable if our rates will actually go down. What does this? What's the cause and effect here? Cause and effect is with the housing has been very stagnant, for years now. So on average, the last 25 years, we in the United States, new plus existing home sales averaged 6 million. Mm-hmm. We had a peak high of 8.4 in 2010, and we had a peak low of 4.8. That was 2010. 2005 was the peak. The low was 2010, post 2008 crash. So last year we did 5 million, so barely above the absolute peak low of the crash in home sales. The average home buyer now in the United States is 56 years old, so they're boomers. So to the younger generation, home buying has become a conspiracy theory, and we sit and they don't have jobs, they have no way to buy a home, and then we wonder why they clutch at these dead ideologies like Marxism. It's just so I like to follow electrical, steel, cars, e-commerce deliveries, and none of this trucking rates are flat. None of this looks good. The global economy is hugely in debt. So I think, we're going to have some years of restructuring ahead, unfortunately.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Marxist factor. We just were on with Trevor Loudon talking about this, and I wanted to bring this up with him, but I ran out of time. But your point about the home buying, I think that is more, as somebody who's a millennial, I'm one of the few who actually owns my home. Most of my friends, though, from college still do not own their home. They're working in high power. I have good friends who are working in high-powered jobs, making good money. Them and their wives and kids, they're renting still. And for Gen Z, it's even worse. Since I don't think the older people in the country realize, between that and all the student debt that we have accumulated or allowed to accumulate, how much of a factor this is in terms of political radicalization. I just want to quickly, though, that somebody I follow on Twitter, very large account, he follows me too, at Justin_Hart, H-A-R-T. He put out a tweet this morning. He said, quote, "Here I am once again begging the Trump administration to lower economic expectations. The payroll report on Friday might be the biggest drop we've seen since 2020. What do you say to that? Is that accurate? Do you think that that's accurate, or is this over concerning? Because there's a lot of noise out there about the economy from both sides.
It's a great point. I think absolutely you need to taper expectations, because, as I mentioned, there is a massive restructuring that has to happen in the United States. The Trump administration was rightly correct on doing the tariffs. So the whole system had to be rebuilt, because no one's operating on free trade. It's complete myth. You'll only find free trade in economic textbooks. In the real world, it doesn't exist. And so you had to restructure it. Like say when China put in Made in China 2025, they didn't negotiate it. They just did it. So what Trump has done with the tariffs, I think, is a right start, although I disagree tactically how they did it with the constant changes. So absolutely, it was the right step, but it is going to take time to restructure. So you can't just go, building factories. And my company and my group, we're working on this now. We're trying to reindustrialize the U.S. We are looking at several verticals within the industry. We can bring factories back to the United States, but these things take time. So Trump administration has a lot of great investment commitments from countries that needs to continue, but also the execution has to happen. But it takes years for these jobs to unfold, to really create the momentum. And so he's got to taper expectations and let people know we've mismanaged this place for 25 years. It's going to take time to fix.
Yeah, well, he is a realtor by training, and they sell the dream. So I don't know. I don't know if he's able to temper. I hope he is, because I think you're right. And I've been saying this. Han Solo in the original Star Wars, don't get cocky. That's something that I keep telling my friends in MAGA. Let me ask you this: we have a guest of ours, a dear friend of mine, a very renowned geopolitical analyst. His name is Gregory Copley. And he has come out in the last couple weeks with these reports that Xi Jinping, because you have a lot of experience working manufacturing sector in China, he has reports coming out from supposed insiders saying that Xi Jinping is on his way out. He's made an agreement to step aside in the next People's Congress, which is sometime this fall. If you guys could play clip number 6, please.
Well, it's true that Xi Jinping has never made one decision in his career as leader of the PRC, which has been favorable either to himself or to the People's Republic of China. He has been a complete disaster. He doesn't care about economic theory. He cares about sovereignty and the dominance of the party. But the problem started before Xi. I said in 2007 that given the water and food production capability of the PRC, that they would, unless they could correct those issues, collapse by 2025. And that's what we have.
So, Dan, my question is, because obviously I've tracked China for a living. That's part of my job. Even I get a little confused on these data points coming out, because on the one hand, they've got these incredible pulse manufacturing systems they're doing, and they're producing the 6th generation warplane when we can't even get ours off the ground. And then you get reports from people that I know and trust saying, hey, all is not well in the political system. And it's because they haven't been addressing certain systemic problems. which sounds believable to me because our politicians, as we were just talking about here in the United States, don't address systemic problems. So with your background and your knowledge, have you heard any of these rumors? Is there any teeth to it? Or is this more just, confusion coming out of China?
Well, I look for the source. I started looking at this as well, and a lot of the source coming out of Atlantic Council. So I instantly don't trust it, to be honest. It's just, yeah, China has problems. The economy is not good. It's been not good for many years now. I have friends that have factories that haven't had orders. They're going on vacation for 6 months. So China's definitely in a restructuring phase, the whole property bubble hangover. They're still going through that. They're still going through a whole economic transition where everybody wanted to work in factories. Now nobody wants to work in a factory, but everyone has factories. So they're going through their transition. But in terms of the political side of it, I think it's only anybody's guess. She operates like a mafioso boss. So I would be shocked if he doesn't retire or pass away as the top guy in China. I would be kind of shocked. I think he's been for more than a decade, he's been taking out any challenges to his power, including the Shanghai faction, which had all the money. Some of these guys I know. But yeah, I would be shocked if something happens. And I don't think US even has good enough intelligence now to really even understand what's going on.
Well, that's 100% correct. Remember, Obama presided over the loss of all of our human intelligence sources in 2013 in China. And actually, so the name that keeps being floated around is Wang Yang as a possible replacement to Xi, which I think is easier to say. So I'm all for it. So in the last 30 seconds or so, how, if this is to happen, this transition, or even just with the economic problems you're talking about, because we're still so tethered to them in China, how does this affect Trump's economic agenda if they're going through this slowdown?
We are absolutely, it's impossible to decouple from China right now. That's why I always say, we have to play the chessboard the way the chessboard is, not the way we want it. Right now, we are linked to China because everything you physically touch is coming from China. If that's not, or at least the subcomponents are coming from China. We need time to reindustrialize the country, bring all these skills back, build stuff ourselves. We can't build a ship here anymore. So, we need to bide our time to reindustrialize the country and keep things on an even keel in terms of that. Until we, you can't win a war if you don't have an industrial base. If we learned anything from the fall of the Soviet Union, let's not go down that path. Let's reindustrialize the country.
Well, this has been a phenomenal conversation. Thank you so much. Check out his podcast, Chaos Incorporated. And I'm Brandon Weichert, and this is The Absolute Truth with Emerald Robinson.
Whether it's being a weekend warrior or spending time with your family, feeling your best is the key to doing the things you love. That's why I'm excited to tell you about Nirvanta. It's a natural solution designed to help you stay active and live well naturally. Nirvanta is a topical blend of all natural essential oils like frankincense, myrrh, and a proprietary gold standard plant stock extract. It's perfect for your hands, feet, knees, back, or anywhere else that needs a little extra care. Use Nirvanta proactively as part of your daily maintenance routine, and you're guaranteed you're going to feel the difference. Simply massage Nirvanta in for at least 60 seconds, 2 to 3 times a day to get the best results. And if you're not completely satisfied, you get your money back. No questions asked. There's simply no risk and no reason not to try Nirvanta today. Right now, you get 15% off with code Lindell exclusively at nirvantahealth.com. So stop reaching out for that medicine cabinet. Get Nirvanta instead and experience the difference. Go to nirvantahealth.com. Use code Lindell to get 15% off today. Nirvanta Health. Live well naturally.
Welcome back to The Absolute Truth with Emerald Robinson. I'm Brandon Weichert, your guest host. Breaking news, everybody. It looks like the profligate, degenerate rapper Diddy is skating on most of the charges. He was convicted, apparently, earlier today, on 2 of the 5 counts. And those 2 counts, apparently, if you can go to clip number 2, apparently those 2 counts only carry a maximum sentence of 10 years, which means Diddy goes to jail and he's going to be out in 2035 if all goes according to plan. So what really is going on? Diddy is obviously a serial offender, a sexual deviant extraordinaire. The question is, how can somebody with so much dirt possibly get off on such a relatively small conviction? If you can pull up clip number 3, guys, for many years, the notorious rapper Suge Knight, who was a serious rival to Diddy back in the 90s, he has maintained for many years, clip number 4, he has maintained for many years that, in fact, the Diddy has been really just an FBI informant, which would explain one of the reasons why Diddy might not have gone to jail when anybody else who did even a fraction what he did would have gone to jail for life. He's only going to get 10 years, it looks like. Joining us now to break this down is our friend, the independent investigative journalist. She's been all over this story, Liz Crokin. It's great to finally meet you in person. So, Liz, why don't you just tell us what the heck is going on? Because in my experience, when somebody is a criminal informant at the level that Diddy possibly was, they share him among all the agencies, and he becomes too valuable to take down. And that to me, and I'm just conjecturing, but that to me looks like that might be at play here. He's too valuable to take down. What do you say to that?
Well, it's good to meet you virtually, Brandon, but I want to start off by telling Emerald, I don't know if she's watching, I know she's on vacation, but she was not as optimistic as me. She thought that he would skate, this thing potentially could be a cover up. And I'm like, I think that he would be found guilty on some of the charges and probably get a verdict late Wednesday. And so that's exactly what happened. So I'll take a little victory lap for being accurate on that. And okay, so he was found guilty on 2 charges out of 5. That's a positive thing. He didn't skate. He didn't get off. So I take that as a win. Any semblance of justice we can get from some of these high level criminals is a win, in my opinion, because many of these people, including Diddy, have managed to skate and evade justice for decades. So now, in terms of, is it the justice that we want to see? Well, no. But does that mean that justice won't happen? Does that mean that this won't lead to further justice? In my opinion, it will. And I will tell you something. I just did Benny Johnson's show. And before my appearance, Lil Rod was one of his guests. Now, Lil Rod is one of the over 70 individuals who have filed civil suits against Diddy. And part of the reason why charges were brought against Diddy, his homes were raided, he was arrested, is because of Lil Rod's suits, right? So Lil Rod said that he strongly believes and also is hearing from his sources that there will be more criminal charges filed against Diddy. I have said this here on the show, and I'm going to say it again today. I think that this is just the beginning of the justice phase for Diddy. And I want to remind your audience that when Diddy was first charged, it was only on a few charges. And earlier this year, they expanded the charges to include more counts. There are more and more people who are filing civil suits, including this week alone, who are alleging that he committed more and other crimes. So there's no reason for us to think that these civil suits, just like Lil Rod's, will not lead to more criminal charges against, by the way, not just Diddy, his co-conspirators. So this is a great day, in my opinion. He was found guilty on 2 of the charges. He could face up to 20 years in prison for this. And this show's going to keep going. I do think that we are going to see more charges brought against him. So this is a small, positive, good step in the right direction.
Well, that's certainly true. I think the concern was, though, that he's not really yet been brought up on more of these issues. I think the problem right now for many people is they really wanted to see, him go to jail for explicitly what he did. And it just watching the trial, I wasn't as involved with it as you were, but it did seem like the prosecution really wasn't making the case, or they didn't have the case yet that they should have been making. They were able to get the 2-count convicted, absolutely, and that is a good thing. I didn't want people to think that I was saying it was a bad thing. But ultimately, those of us, we know there's more to this story than what they're letting on. And we've already been through this with the Epstein files. We've already been through this with Ghislaine Maxwell. I'm not saying they're necessarily connected, but there's a pattern here. And the claims that he might be a very high-level FBI informant for many decades, that really lends, I think, to some of us who are concerned that we're not going to get the full justice with the full story told that we've been wanting to. But it sounds like there is you're being hopeful, so that's good.
Yes.
That makes me hopeful. What other you had another thing you sent us about the Jay-Z related to this.
Yeah.
Jay-Z is one of Diddy's compatriots in this vile, sordid affair. Just walk us through what's going on with him and why, because I believe he lost a lawsuit, if I'm not mistaken, and that sounds like that might also be very good.
It is. It's a very positive thing. So in my opinion, Jay-Z is just as bad as Diddy. He hasn't been charged with anything yet, but Tony Buzbee is an attorney that has represented several victims of Diddy. And one of the victims that he represented is someone who claims that she was raped allegedly by Diddy and Jay-Z when she was 13 years old. Now, in response to this suit that Buzbee filed on this young victim who was very young when this happened, a child, I will add. In response to this, Jay-Z filed a suit against Tony Buzbee, and a California judge, of all judges, a California judge dismissed that lawsuit this week. So that is a win for Tony Buzbee. That is a win for, these potential victims, not just Diddy, but Jay-Z as well. And as I said, I do believe that we will see more charges not only brought up against Diddy. I think that we will see more charges brought up against his potential, co-conspirators, such as potentially Jay-Z. I actually wouldn't be surprised if we saw charges brought against Jay-Z before the end of this year.
That is incredible. I mean, I know that he might actually be in many ways worse than Diddy because so that would be a good thing. Now, there were reports throughout this thing at the beginning, at least about a year ago, I was hearing that they were saying Kanye was involved as well in this. And, I haven't really heard anything in the last year, but I was wondering if you've heard anything and if you could enlighten us. I know that he used to run with that crew, and there have been some victims who've come forward and said that Kanye was around when some of these assaults occurred. But have you heard anything further? Is there any information on that side of the story?
Well, Kanye West obviously ran in the same circles as Jay-Z and Diddy. Kanye has performed with Jay-Z, but I'll also remind people that Kanye, starting back in 2016, has also been exposing these people, including Jay-Z. Right. Back in 2016, he accused Jay-Z of having murderers. So I have not heard that Kanye witnessed, them trafficking and or raping victims. I have not heard that. But he did run in those circles, and he has been working to expose these people over the years. And he has, said a lot of things about them. And there's a lot of things that Kanye has said that has come true. And so I don't think that we're going to see him get dragged into any criminal charges.
Well, so as we go forward, some of these civil cases may, as you say, lead to criminal charges. Another thing that I had heard someone saying was that, that Kanye and I'm not Kanye, I'm sorry, Diddy was in many respects kind of smarter or more wily than Epstein was, and that there was a belief that, whereas they may have, suicided Epstein to keep him quiet, there's sort of a reticence to do that now, possibly with Diddy. Do you think that Diddy may be, in fact, deeper involved with some kind of, conspiracy than even Epstein was? Or is this just, internet conspiracy theories?
I don't know if it would be deeper than Epstein, because Epstein goes very deep and the mainstream media hasn't even touched the surface of what he was involved in, maybe as deep. But I do believe that Diddy was involved in trafficking children. I do believe that he was also involved in trafficking at the border. I do believe he was also involved in drug trafficking. And as you said earlier, I do believe, he was protected by, bad elements of our law enforcement, including the FBI. But I will also say that it's a new day and there's a new sheriff in town. And one of them is Kash Patel and the other is President Donald Trump. And we're in the golden age. I do believe that this is a time for justice. I do believe that more of these elites will be brought to justice. More of them will be arrested. And they're not going to be able to get away with what they've gotten away with for decades.
Well, it's very nice to have a hopeful message on this, because I personally have been very concerned. And again, I want to reiterate, I should have been clearer in the beginning. I wasn't saying 2 counts out of 5 is nothing. But my last question here would be, I think about a month ago, President Trump, and he tends to vamp when he's on camera. Somebody asked him, I think it was Peter Doocy of Fox, there's a rumor that Diddy's trying to get a pardon, and Trump said that he would be open to that. Do you think there was anything to that? And if so, why would he be talking about a pardon for Diddy?
I think that he would have said that about any case. He has said in the past that, he'd be open to looking at any cases, right? And so I don't really make much of that. I don't think that will happen. Something that I think is actually more interesting than that is that R. Kelly is tied to all these people, and he was thrown in jail for sex trafficking, and he's been coming out and saying that people are trying to kill him in prison. And I've come on the show and I've discussed the potential fact that Jay-Z may have been involved in setting up R. Kelly. And so anyways, R. Kelly has been saying that people are trying to murder him in prison. And it's like, well, why would they be trying to murder him in prison? Like, who's really directing that if that's true? And is it because he knows information on Diddy and or Jay-Z or, any of Diddy's co-conspirators? And are they trying to prevent him from talking? Because that guy has been in prison for a long time. And I imagine he's pissed. So he came out and said this, and, a lot of people wrote it off as, oh, whatever. And then the next thing you know, he's overdosing in prison. Yeah. So it's like, well, maybe it's not just in his head. Maybe someone is trying to kill him. So his lawyers actually have been, pleading to President Trump and his administration that, that he gets out and pardoned, primarily because he's a target and they believe that his life is in danger. So that's another story that I'm following that people should pay attention to.
Well, there's definitely a lot of moving parts, which is why I still go back and think there's got to be some kind of deep state connection to this whole story. And we are definitely going to keep tracking it. Thank you for bringing a dose of hope to those of us who were starting to think justice wasn't going to be done. And it looks like this is a long road before we're done. And so that's actually good in this case. And I know Emerald's going to want you back, and she'll be back next week sitting in the chair again. Thank you for joining me this Wednesday, and have a great 4th of July weekend. I'm Brandon Weichert. I'm filling in for Emerald Robinson on The Absolute Truth. please be sure to stay tuned to Lindell TV. This is the future of right-wing media. We've got the stories. We've got the scoops. We've got two great people on the ground in D.C., Kara Castronova and Allison Steinberg. And we'll see you later today at 2:30 to talk more about the big, beautiful bill. Have a great day, guys.